Hello, LinkedIn. I hope everyone's having a fantastic day. I am Janice Thornton, certified online personal trainer, and we've got Edward Gibbons with me today, and he is our healthcare specialist and health insurance specialist, and he'll give you more details of what he does as well. But we are reviewing the book, Never Pay the First Bill and Other Ways to Fight the Healthcare System and Win. This week, we are talking about on chapter 6. Chapter 6 is all about testing and are you getting over tested and having too many procedures done. I thought, Edward, okay, so everyone, Edward and I both have worked in the pharmaceutical world. We have called on doctors for a number of years. And I can speak from my experience. So, doctors don't want to get sued. So they want to make sure they do every little test possible to cover every avenue, which that part makes sense. At the same time, you as a consumer are the one who is having to flip that bill. And there's a lot of times that you're getting all these unnecessary tests that we may not be needing. So Edward, tell us what you do, and then I want your thoughts on that.
Very, very true statements there, Janice. My name is Edward Gibbons. I'm a health insurance advisor. I'm licensed in 10 different states to sell health insurance for people under 65 and over 65. And as Janice says, we've got a mutual connection in that we've worked in the healthcare field for quite a bit of time. And when we came across this book, we just felt it'd be a good idea to help people understand the system a little bit better so you can navigate it in a better way. The first 5 chapters that we've gone over have basically just talked about what happens if I get a bogus bill? What happens if or when I get my bill, and how do I make sure that I'm paying for it the right way? This second part of the book that we're going to start to go through is how do we avoid that? Because remember, it's the healthcare system, and it's a system that's a business. Your providers are there to help you, but it is a business. So you also have to treat it that way when you're interacting with it so that you make the best choices for you and your family, and not an unnecessary emotional choice. Because that emotional choice leads to an inflation in the system, inflated products, inflated pricing, and that causes us all pain. I did think it was interesting where he goes through and gives some very good examples of people paying for overinflated needs. As you said, doctors are trying to protect themselves from being sued. So they're going to present you with options. And remember, these are options that they're giving you for your course of treatment. It's your choice on which options you choose. And you always have a right to a second opinion, even a third opinion, to make sure you're picking the right options for you and your family.
I'm going to interject real quick there, but understand they are giving you the options, and they're going to guide you toward the more expensive option because they may be getting reimbursed more. And understand these doctors do know how much, they have a good idea of how much they're going to get reimbursed for a lot of these tests. And so they're going to guide you to where they can make the most money. And again, as Edward said, this is a business. And when you can start looking at your doctor as more of a businessman, it's going to help you out tremendously to be able to do that. Because so, for example, when you brought up, so the unnecessary tests. So one of the stories that was one of the first stories, the author brought up, colonoscopy for people. And I actually had an example myself. So my husband, I used to sell GI products. So I was in GI offices a lot, and I could see pictures of healthy colons, unhealthy colons. So when my husband went in to get a colonoscopy at 50 years old, I'm talking to the doctor at the end, and he's showing me pictures of my husband's colon. And I'm like, oh my gosh, look how, and the doctor's like, look how healthy that is. And I'm like, you can tell how healthy that is. Yet, so my husband is adopted though, and he doesn't know his biological background of his dad. And so the doctor recommended, since you are adopted, you should really have another colonoscopy in 5 years, even though he didn't have one lick of evidence of anything that would require him to come back in 5 years, except that he was adopted. So then but I'm thinking, why? He's perfectly fine. He can go for 10 more years. Myself, I go for my colonoscopy, and my brother has ulcerative colitis. I really believe my dad had some colon issues that he would never talk about because I think he was too embarrassed for his age to talk about that. But I go for my colonoscopy, and they actually had to snip something out, like a polyp or something. So she did recommend for me that, everything looked good, except she goes, because we had to do that, then maybe you should come back in 5 years. So that I could buy more than my husband with this perfectly clean colon. Like, if she said everything was perfect and she told me to come back in 5 years, I'd have been like, I'll come back in 10. But there is one example of the doctors, oh, come back in 5, you're adopted, but your colon looks perfect, kind of thing. I'm like, he'll be fine. He's got a healthy diet, exercises. I'm like, wait a minute, silly. So again, catch that kind of stuff from your doctor.
Well, exactly. And, reach out to other communities and ask certain questions. My ex-wife is a doctor, and I remember during one of her trainings, she wanted to investigate a certain type of drug that was used in the emergency room that was considered the second line drug. It was a good drug, but it would be the second choice because she saw that its efficacy was better than the first line drug.
Ooh.
So she wanted to do a study. She took it to the review board, and the review board said no, because it's not the first line drug. The drug would have been cheaper. The drug would have been more efficacious if she could have researched it to see, is it actually better to be used first rather than second? So sometimes the system sets itself up to not allow for some flexibility, and thus it increases cost. It's not necessarily one doctor saying, I'm just going to increase those costs, but it's the way the system is set up that this snowball effect just builds upon itself and builds upon itself. You brought up the colonoscopy. They also brought up about MRIs. And I used to sell medical devices as well. And I did see hospitals that, hey, we bought this big fancy equipment. How are we going to pay for it? So now all of a sudden they start to use an indication for a piece of equipment that they have as justification to use it more often, so that they can bill for it and pay for that piece of equipment.
Well, I feel like that's what they've done with mammograms. So it's setting a mammogram as the gold standard, and they have all these big breast cancer buildings that they have to pay for. And I can tell you this. So of course they recommend mammogram at 40. And there's another nice story in here that we'll elaborate on a little bit more in a different angle. But when I was 40, I ended up having a positive mammogram. So I'm headed to the breast surgeon's office. They do an ultrasound, and what they find is that I have dense breast tissue. So therefore I'm almost always going to have a positive mammogram. And for me, I'm like, okay, then that's kind of stupid for me to even get one. Why get the radiation part of the mammogram? Why not just do the ultrasound? Oh no, we can't do that. We have to do the mammogram also. I'm like, okay, again, that doesn't make sense if I'm always going to be a false positive. So then I learned about thermograms. And in Scottsdale, my doctor here, she's MD. I was shocked. She was actually okay with me doing a thermogram. And that is where they actually measure heat in your body, and your boobs aren't squished. It's great, ladies. And the people who do thermograms will tell you a thermogram can actually detect cancer 8 years prior to usually what a mammogram could do. But it's not the gold standard because the equipment is a whole lot less, and it doesn't drive the kind of money that a mammogram does. But I ended up moving to California, and my doctor here in Scottsdale, she was fine. Send me the results. That'll be great. Go to California, and then I get into a big argument with the MD there. She's just like, no, the mammogram is the gold standard. That's what you need to do. I'm just like, no, you need to pay for that big building over there. That's why you're shoving this down my throat. I don't need to do that. I'll go get my thermogram. Thank you.
Mhm.
And she was not, she and I didn't get along very well, needless to say. However, you have to stand up and do some research on, just because they say this is the gold standard doesn't mean anything. Because
It
really,
doesn't, and everybody is individual. So what might be good for you may not be good for me. My biggest takeaway from this chapter for people is take control of your healthcare. Don't simply say yes because it's a provider, a healthcare provider. Ask questions. Make sure that they're
yes,
justifying who they are and what they are. I like to use this as a good example. You know, your MD has their degree on the wall. They've come in to talk to you. You may not know whether they graduated top of their class or bottom of their class.
right.
And I used to like to use this example. And during the Civil War, Robert E. Lee was the commanding general for the Confederate forces and graduated at the top of his class at West Point. Ulysses S. Grant was the commanding general, the last commanding general of the Union forces, and he was near the bottom of his class. Right? So sometimes people get set in their ways with certain things and aren't able to adapt to things that change, to new standards that come out, or to new options that are available to them. They learned it in school and they say, that's the gold standard, that's what I'm going to do. And then you have another doctor who's like, yes, that was the gold standard, but there's a couple of other tests or options that are as accurate or as accurate for the patient population that I see coming through my door.
Yeah.
So I'm going to use that. And that's where you can push back and forth. You don't have to know the answers and have an MD as a patient, but you can ask questions to make sure you're getting the tests you need to have, not unnecessary tests, and you're not paying for things that you don't need.
Yeah, and that's the thing, is paying for stuff that you don't need. Because I think where people don't realize, and we've put so much trust into the pharmaceutical industry, the medical device industry, and our physicians, is every procedure, every pill, every type of medication, whether it's an injection, has some kind of risk to it. Nothing is 100% safe. And you always have to outweigh the risks to the benefits and to see like what is going to be best for you. And that's where you want to be informed with the tests, even the tests, like getting an MRI done and having to have the stuff injected into your body, the contrast can have an effect on your body. And it's not like you want to go get an MRI every other day. And I think some people are like, oh, just give me an MRI, give me an MRI, let me do that test. Or whatever test it is, like, oh, just let me get that test. But there's a risk involved every time that you do that. And people are too comfortable with, whatever. It's
Correct.
surprising to me.
I think a good example would be diabetes. So like type 1 diabetes. Some people are pre-diabetic. Some people need some medications for their diabetes. And other people can be pre-diabetic or early or diabetic, early stages of it, change their eating habits, change their exercise habits, and that disease state reverses itself. They become non-diabetic. So did they need to take medication for it? Or is it a lifestyle change that helped them improve their own health? And that's where people need to think or have their mindset when they're told by their doctor they need a test or they need a medication. Do I really need this test or procedure or medication? Ask how what's being recommended will specifically address the issue. I have a nephew who has autism, and his parents have decided to use essential oils and diet as ways to help him. And they have found that certain diets, certain essential oils used in certain ways can help bring him back to a more stable area of action where he can respond to people, interact with people, and not have issues. Again, he is still autistic. He's still going to have certain issues, but he's able to interact with people. He's able to get on a plane. He's able to be in long car rides. Okay? And so sometimes we just need to take a step back and go, what can I do that changes my lifestyle to help me heal my body so I don't necessarily need to have a procedure or take a medication? And or if I need to take a medication, opioids is a good example as well. Okay, doctor, I know that they're more regulated now, but why don't you just give me one or two while I'm in the hospital? And then I'll have something else when I leave the hospital so that I don't get addicted to something like this to take care of
Right.
every ache and pain.
Right. Absolutely. And I love essential oils. They're awesome. Ladies and gentlemen, if you haven't used essential oils, you should definitely check into them. Now, I will say this, you don't want to go buy just something at Bed Bath and Beyond. Sorry, they don't have, or Walmart. No, they have a lot of chemicals in them. You want to make sure you have a high quality essential oil. At the same time, they really can help your body heal itself. They just help your body heals itself when your body's given the right tools to be able to heal itself. And essential oils can be one of those tools for sure. Yeah, absolutely love essential oils. They're awesome.
Mhm.
One of the things in the book that it said is the industry gets paid by doing stuff, whether you need it or not.
Mhm.
And I thought that was, well, it's very true. I mean, if, for example, I go to the doctor once a year to go get a physical, that's pretty much the only time my doctor sees me.
Mhm.
And so my doctor doesn't make any money off of me at all. So they don't have people in there like blood pressure patients. In Oklahoma, when I called on doctors in Oklahoma, my doctors got to the point where they're like, if you have multiple disease states, if you have high blood pressure, high cholesterol, diabetes, whatever, all the stuff that you have, you had to schedule an appointment for each of those ailments. They were not going to cover everything in one visit.
Mhm.
So that's what made me sad. I'm like, you're making all these people pay extra copays,
Mhm.
but then all of those things also can be helped with a healthier lifestyle.
Mhm.
But so many people would rather just pop a pill than would rather change their lifestyle. But when you start looking at side effects, if people would actually look at side effects of some of these drugs, I would like to think you'd want to think twice about actually taking it. And I know if you listen to drug commercials on TV, holy crap, like, do you listen to
Yes.
the side effects? I mean, I
Well,
know
those
I
are
do.
usually done said real fast and in a really tiny print.
Right,
And
exactly.
nobody looks at at the prescription information inside the bottles or inside the packaging so they can see exactly what's there. Because that's another question to ask your doctors. What's the risks?
Mhm.
Um, and to even ask them point blank, if I was your mother, if I was your father, if I was your brother, would you recommend this course of action for me?
Mhm. And
Um,
that's a great question to put it that way, so they can
mhm.
get more of a family orientation to it.
Yes, because again, you're asking them for their advice. That's what they're providing to you. And if you take their advice, then they'll walk you down that path. If you choose not to take their advice, they should let you know the risks, rewards, and
Mhm.
still be with you on that path. I remember I had a doctor that I worked with in Irving, Texas, and the particular drug that I sold was more expensive than the generic, but its efficacy proved better than the generic option. But
Mhm.
he chose, early on when I talked to him, he chose to prescribe the cheaper generic drug to his patients because he thought they couldn't afford it.
Oh,
And I gave him an example one time of just saying, what if this, because the medication they used was a life-saving drug for people who had asthma. Okay? If they had
Mhm.
an asthma attack, someone who has an asthma attack, they don't want to have to go to the hospital, because if they have to go to the
Right.
hospital or the ER, it's a very expensive process and procedure. Um, and so we talked through that, and I said, just ask your patients which would they choose. Would they prefer to choose a lower percentage of breaking an asthma attack or a higher percentage of breaking an asthma attack? And when he did that, his patients chose the more expensive drug because it allowed them the opportunity to not go to the ER as often.
And that's a big deal. That's a huge deal. Great. That's a
It's
great question to ask.
yeah, it's a huge deal. But what he did is he didn't make the choice for the patient. When he asked those questions, he started to say, I'm going to give you the pros and the cons. You make the choice. Okay. And I'm sure there are plenty of patients who said, no, I'm going to take the other choice. That's fine. But sometimes we defer to the doctor and just say, I'm going to do what you tell me to do. I'm going to take this extra test. I'm going to take this extra option. And in the case of this drug, you have to think about it this way. You may end up paying $5 or $10 more for this medication that you get each month. But one ER visit could be $5,000, $10,000, $50,000 for that family. So
Right.
you want to pay $2 and you have an asthma attack that you know you get once or twice a year and then have to pay those thousands of dollars out of pocket. If you're asking the right questions to your provider, they should be able to give you information so you can make the best choice for your family.
Absolutely. Let's see. Oh, one of the questions that he posed in the book is this procedure or medication or treatment actually necessary?
Mhm.
And again, it's when these doctors are just trying to kind of cover their butts, you need to ask them, like, why do I need all of these treatments? To me, it's kind of like going to the car mechanic.
Yep.
What really needs to be done on my car? What can I get by with? You know, what can I get by with now? So I don't have to all of a sudden pay a $5,000 bill and I can maybe pay $500 versus same with your body. Ask them what really needs to be done. Like, do I need these 10 tests or can I get by with one type of thing? Don't be afraid to ask, I guess, is really the big question. We got to stop putting these people on a pedestal as far as I'm concerned.
Correct. They're here to help us, but it's your life. It's your family member and your health. So take some control, some responsibility to ask more detailed questions. I think a lot of people just kind of default to I have insurance. Okay, am I going to skip paying for my car insurance this month so I can hit my deductible because I have to pay for this MRI and this colonoscopy that the doctor has told me I need, instead of asking the question, what if I wait? What's the side effect to this? Because the doctor might be able to, hey, if you change your diet and you do this and you do that, this is going to end up doing the exact same thing as if I give you this medication. Now you're not worried about, can I pay for my car insurance because I have to pay a deductible for this procedure or this medication I need to have, because all I need to do is change a little bit of my lifestyle and I'll be good to go.
Well, one of the things that was interesting in this chapter was one of the key questions that they asked was, what does the U.S. Preventative Services Task Force recommend? First of all, I was like, who? When I read that, I was like, who are you? I've never heard of you. But it's the U.S. Preventative Services Task Force. They are not pharma funded, which that's a big deal right there. They're funded by taxpayers. So they are really out to find out what is best for us. And if you have time to do a little research, they would be a great place to go. And there's actually a link that we can put into the comments once we post this, that people will be able to click on and take a look. But I thought that was interesting because when it comes to mammograms, for women, it was always at 40 years old, you get your first mammogram to be a baseline. And then, but according to the U.S. Preventative Services Task Force, they don't actually recommend a mammogram until 50, because based on all the different researches and all the different studies, we really can get by with waiting until we're 50 years old before getting a mammogram. And quite honestly, that saves you a minimum of 5 mammograms, 5 times not getting radiation, 5 times not getting your boob squished, 5 times of not having stress if you found something and had a false positive, 5 times not going to another, having to go to the breast surgeon or, something like that. So I found that part very interesting. And I just wonder how many other things that really could just kind of be bumped up without this I'm all into prevention. Don't get me wrong. I'm very much
Mhm.
into prevention. At the same time, I don't like it to be wasteful prevention stuff either.
Correct. I agree with you. And I was just thinking about that as well. We're not saying don't go get your physical. We're not saying don't go see the doctor. In fact, if you do that on a routine basis, one, you'll start to know your baseline. Like I know in
Mhm.
my family, for me, my blood pressure is a little bit elevated, just naturally. When I exercise, it's happened to be more evident when I was younger. My active heart rate was much higher, was in the red zone, but I was perfectly fine.
Right.
But if I didn't know that and I didn't go see the doctor and I didn't have an understanding that when my blood pressure's here, if I'm exercising, that's me.
Right. Yep.
Okay. I'm not in a bad zone for myself.
Right.
Um, so now I know, hey, if this is elevated, all right, here's some things to check and then
Right.
see if if I'm still operating in my proper zone. Some people may be lower, their blood pressure may be lower naturally, and they
Mhm.
need to understand that. But that way, if you're routinely seeing your doctor once or twice a year just for your physicals, when things pop up, you have more questions to ask about, do I just need to adjust something in my life? Or is this something that requires a more in-depth look to see if something's beginning to happen?
Yeah, because really with you saying that, that's a great point of like, for yourself, your blood pressure runs, it just elevates when you exercise. But when they come out with guidelines, everyone just gets dumped into a bucket. Like for
Yes.
blood pressure, if you've got high blood pressure, it's 140/90. If you're above that, yep, you have high blood pressure, here's some meds.
Mhm.
Where you might function, your body might like 140/90, and that's where you've been for 20 years.
Yep.
And that doesn't mean that you're unhealthy. It just, because I can use my husband again. For example, he was one of those people, he gets thrown in that bucket of 140/90, puts him on meds. He's tried different medications and he ends up feeling sick, dizzy, feels like crap when he's on them. I'm like, forget it. Don't take them because you
Mhm.
exercise on a regular basis, you eat healthy. I think you're going to be fine. I think it's where his body just likes to be, because if he gets it too low, he gets dizzy. And then
Yeah.
he's like, then he doesn't function well. I'm like, okay,
Mhm.
then no, you're not going to. Or he actually got the ACE cough. And yeah, so it's like, nope, just, you don't need that. It's all good.
Yeah. And for me, when I graduated West Point, you have to do a height weight examination to
Oh,
make
yeah.
sure that you're the proper height and weight. And I was
Right.
fortunate enough to play football for um, all 4 years I was there. Was very athletic. Myself and other football players went in, and I was probably all of 188 pounds at that point in time. Had very little body fat, and they did the height weight measurement and told me that I was overweight. I'm going, how is that possible? I'm trying to find fat on my body, and you're telling me I'm overweight.
Well, at least I didn't give you obese, because using
No.
that BMI scale, a lot of
Yes.
doctors use the BMI scale.
Mhm.
And yeah, you can be fit, tall, and just have lots of muscle mass. And
Yep.
yeah, all of a sudden you're obese and you're like, no,
Yeah.
sorry.
How is that possible? Um, so
And
those are things
everyone
that
gets
people should,
lumped in.
yeah, everybody gets lumped in. So that's why having those, being preventative, like we're talking about, seeing your doctor on a routine basis, but asking questions. You have a
Yes,
right to ask questions. You don't have to just take their word for it per se, and accept this test, that test, and the next test. Make sure it's medically necessary, and they have a reason behind it, a legitimate reason behind it.
absolutely. Because I know one of the stories they told in here was a gentleman he had neck and back issues. They
Mhm.
recommended surgery. And of course, if you go see a surgeon, guess what? If they don't do surgery, they don't get paid. So of course they're going to
Mhm.
recommend surgery. But so instead of doing surgery, he decided to lose some weight. He went to physical therapy. He started exercising on a regular basis, and he ended up not needing the surgery. And I guarantee you, especially when it comes to your neck and your back, that's always a little trickier area for you to have good outcomes. And
Mhm.
it can always be scarier. So one study they looked at another study, and it was that people who needed back surgeries versus doing physical therapy and doing other lifestyle changes found people really, if they did the lifestyle changes, lost some weight, did just as well as if they would have had the back surgery. The last thing you want to do is have to get your body worked on. If you don't have to, gosh, don't jump the gun and go, yeah, I'm going to actually go get it. Try lots of other options first.
Correct. You actually reminded me of something a friend of mine who's a chiropractor brought up. Sometimes people use this system to the detriment of the patient. She had a patient who came in and the previous chiropractor had prescribed to them that they needed to come in 3 times a week for the next 8 weeks.
Yeah.
And you should have just seen her face when she's like, nobody should have to come in 3 times a week for 8 weeks. It's like, what are you doing that's not helping your patient if they're on that type of regimen to come see the chiropractor? And that's where that second opinion comes in. That's where why, what is the process that's going on and why do I need this? She has a counterpart who's a massage therapist in our group, and they go back and forth saying, maybe if you come just get a massage on a more routine basis because you're sitting wrong at work, that alleviates some of the stress that's going on in your back, which will alleviate some of this pain that you're feeling. And as you said, change your lifestyle. I lose a little bit of weight. I exercise a little bit more. That issue goes away. I don't need to have a surgery or an MRI to find out what's wrong with my back when it's more of a lifestyle change.
Right. Absolutely. One of the things you brought up, Edward, and which is great, and this is something to always remember, always get a second or third opinion. I get it. You might have this fantastic relationship with this doctor of yours. However, my gosh, I just can't reiterate enough. If you're going to have some kind of surgery or some kind of big procedure, get a second and third opinion. Sure, it's a little bit more of a hassle, but holy cow, it might save you thousands and thousands of dollars in the long run if you can get a couple different opinions to give you some just different angles of how to look at what needs to be done.
Well, you're absolutely right. I think of it this way. Anybody who has children and has children who have reached puberty into those teenage years, remember when your kids were little and they thought you could do no wrong. Your parents made no mistakes. Once they reach puberty and got into those teenage years, you can't do anything right. They question you all the time. They want you to be able to back up what you're saying. In essence, that's what you want to do with your healthcare providers. Just make sure they back up what they're saying and you understand why I need XYZ, because you might need that MRI. You might need that surgery, but let's make sure you need it and it's not something extra or they're checking the box to cover their proverbial backside. But that it's something that you actually need to help you get better, to help you heal.
Absolutely. I was just kind of going through my notes. Okay, I have to share this funny story, and then we've been on here for almost 45 minutes. That's crazy. But this story that was in the book, in this chapter, was so interesting. This little girl was getting her tongue was tied. So you get this little thing clipped underneath your tongue. Well, the surgeon said, hey, do you want us to pierce your daughter's ears? And the mom was just like, okay, sure. Well, they ended up charging her $1,877 to pierce her daughter's ears. And the mother thought it was going to be something for free. Like, why would you offer that? Holy crap. So don't ever take that kind of addition to your surgery, because she had a heck of a time getting that bill reduced. Like, she would fight. She finally had to bring in like a journalist or someone to call the hospital. So they're like, oh, okay, well, now take it off your bill. But yeah, please don't add something simple that like you can go. And that they said the surgeon actually didn't center the earring. So they had to redo it anyway and go spend $30 to go get her ears pierced. So just a little side note there. Well, Edward, is there anything else you want to add for this chapter? I think we nailed this.
No, we
this
nailed this.
chapter.
This is avoiding the need to fight by just asking a few simple questions before you accept the procedure that they're trying to give you or the medication. Simple as
Because it's
that.
easy just to sign. It's so easy just to go, yeah, let me sign the consent, because you just want to
Yes.
get out of there. Ask
Mhm.
questions, everyone. Well, everyone, have a fantastic day. Thank you for listening, and we'll catch you for chapter 7 next week.
Have a good day,
Bye,
everybody.
everyone.
Bye-bye.